let's bring in our expert panel for this evening. Retired IDF Brigadier General Yosef Kuperwasser, former Director General of Israel's Ministry of Strategic Affairs, and Mr. Eran Etzion, former Deputy Director of Israel's National Security Council. Thank you both for joining us this evening. Let's look at the wider picture. The Israeli government promised the Israeli people that we won't leave Gaza until there is no Hamas, or at least there is no Hamas regime. We're hearing now about the change and the move to the third phase, whilst Rafah is still existent with Hamas brigades in it, while the refugee camps in central Gaza are still operative, etc., etc. So has the Israeli government gone too far with its promises, or is it just another phase? Yosef Kuperwasser, we'll begin with you.
Good evening. Well, I think we are still in a phased move to the next phase. We have moved to the third phase in the northern part of Gaza, where we actually took control of the overground Gaza in the north. In the central area and in Khan Yunis, we are still in stage 2, and we are still in the midst of a major military operation over there. And the open question that the answer to is very ambiguous is what's going to happen with Rafah and with the Rafah crossing and with the Philadelphia corridor. These are the open questions, and I sincerely hope that we shall not stop before we finish this part of Gaza too, because otherwise we, as Jonathan said, we are not going to be able to say that we have performed the mission, that we have accomplished the mission. That's the mission of denying Hamas the ability to carry out terror operations from Gaza and to govern Gaza. Because even if Hamas governs only Rafah and the Mawasi area, this is governing Gaza because they are responsible for the population of Gaza and they are able to operate.
But Yossi, you've heard Secretary Blinken speaking today and saying in his words that Israel is pulling out of Gaza without achieving these goals.
No. He was talking about pulling out of... he didn't even speak about pulling out. He was pulling some of the forces out in northern Gaza. That's what's happening right now. But it's still in the midst of... I'm not sure it's going to last for long, but yes, we're still in the midst of the second phase in central Gaza and in Khan Yunis area. And as I said, that's an open question about Rafah. According to Blinken, we should really give up on Rafah, which means that we should allow Hamas to keep controlling Gaza. I believe this is a big mistake. That's what he said, that's true, but he can make mistakes. He makes many mistakes. This is not the only mistake he makes. So that's another mistake he is allowed to make, and this is privilege.
Yes, Eran Etzion, on to you. And I'll start from my previous question. Has the Israeli government gone too far in promising something that we might not be able to deliver?
Absolutely, yes. There is a gap between the promises and the actual reality on the ground. I don't think this gap will be closed anytime in the near future. And it's an open question whether or not it will be closed at all at any time. Because it's not only about the military dimension of this war, as is the case for every war, especially one involving Israel and Palestinians. The more critical dimension, or at least as critical dimension, is the political, diplomatic, strategic dimension. And in this case, we have an Israeli government that has, in full conscience, at the very beginning of the war, decided to ignore this dimension and not to allocate a strategic directive to the IDF and to the Israeli apparatus in general, for political reasons, because this government is not able to satisfy its various factions, ministers like Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, and others. And we have a prime minister who's completely focused on his own political survival for reasons that we all understand. So from the very beginning, Israel launched this war handicapped strategically. And this is now being exposed. It is being exposed by the Americans. The problem is they speak American. And as somebody who's witnessed multiple dialogues, strategic dialogues between Israeli governments and American administrations, it always strikes me the extent to which they speak across each other. The Americans are trying to deliver messages. Sometimes they think they speak harshly and they speak bluntly, but the Israelis do not listen, sometimes even do not hear.
Yes.
And I suspect this is what's going on here now.
And
when the Americans are actually saying, like you said, it's time for Israel to start working towards an end state to this war. And Israel is saying, no, we need at least one more year of combat operations. Well, the Americans are essentially saying you're not going to have this year, and therefore the gap between your goals and the situation on the ground is not going to be closed.
But Iran,
the government is choosing to ignore this.
But as Yosef Kuperwasser rightly said earlier, the Americans do make mistakes, and they're not fighting their war. We are fighting our war, and there won't be any end to Hamas and to Hamas's threat if Rafah, for example, exists. So how are we going to solve that?
First of all, probably the one thing I do agree with Yossi is that the Americans do make mistakes. There's no question about that. And it's even possible that they're making a mistake now. But that's not the question. Israel is totally dependent on U.S. assistance, as we all understand. And if and when the Americans decide to, shall we say, degrade their 100% support to Israel, be it on the military side or in the UN Security Council or in any other way that the Americans have in terms of leverages over Israel, and they have numerous, then Israel will have no choice but to abide by the American dictate. The Americans don't want to get there. The Israeli government also doesn't want to get there, but this will be the next phase unless Israel starts to listen. And regarding Rafah, just one word on Rafah, it's not about Israel's decision, or at least not only about Israel's decision. Again, as we all know, we have occupied Rafah in the past for over 40 years. And unless and until we have full Egyptian cooperation from the southern side of Rafah, from the southern side of the so-called Philadelphia corridor, it makes no difference, or it makes little difference, whether or not Israel is present on this corridor.
So Yossi, back to you. So you've agreed that the Americans are making a lot of mistakes, maybe even now. But does the disagreement between Iran and yourself does not solve the problem on the ground? How can it be solved given the situation, given the hostages, and given Israel's dependence to a certain extent on the American assistance?
Well, first of all, we really need a very close system of process of consultations with the Americans. And I'm very happy that Secretary Blinken was here for the 5th time. And more the delegates on behalf of the American administration are visiting very often. It's very important because we have to explain what's going on the ground and make the Americans understand that we listen to the Americans. We may not understand what they are saying, as Iran said, but we definitely listen to them. But we are together in this business. It's our victory is important for the Americans. It's not only important for us. If we don't win, then the position of the Americans in the Middle East, the position of the United States in the entire global world, global context is going to be harmed dramatically. So they have to be committed to our victory, not much less than we are committed to our victory. That's the point. If we don't win, if we don't get our targets achieved, then the next step is going to be more chutzpah on behalf of Hezbollah in the north and on behalf of the Iranians regarding the nuclear project. The moment the Iranians understood that the Americans are holding us back, they re-energized their nuclear program and started again to enrich uranium to 60% in high capacity. That's where we stand. So the Americans have their own interest in our victory just as we have.
Yosef
And that's
Kuperwasser.
something that we have to discuss with the Americans.
Yosef Kuperwasser, Ran Etzion, thank you so much both for joining us today.